What we know is solidly year after year our numbers increase. We see more and more people. Um, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there are more people experiencing sexual violence, but that there are more people coming forward about their experiences. So specific numbers I don't have, but at this moment, but we certainly, I know the trend is year after year, we see more and more.
Why do you think all this bad behavior can sometimes start at a college campus?
Well, first, there's so many people in close contact with each other. They're all the same age in your in your early 20s. There's a lot of like alcohol involved. There's a lot of factors that can lead to you doing things that aren't you, that aren't, and I think that part of it is just the fact that you're at that time where you're walking around at night, you're dressing up, things like that. Just a lot of factors contribute to it. You're all kind of stacked on top of each other. And I think that really contributes to a lot of it.
We talk about Hollywood, we talk about Washington, we don't really talk about misconduct on college campuses. Why do you think that is?
I think it's just because there's still a lot of underreporting on college campuses. Sorry. And that sometimes students aren't necessarily always sure about where they can go or who they can talk to, what would be most effective for them. And I think that it's easier to see more of an immediate change in Hollywood, like placed in the media, just because they tend to have people who have money and power and influence, whereas that might not be always the case for college students.
There's a lot of reasons why somebody might not come forward or share their story right away, especially on college campuses, because it's kind of a small space to be in. And when somebody experiences sexual violence, our culture has a tendency to disbelieve survivors, or when they come forward and tell their story, somebody says, they might be a liar, or they don't believe them, or that they're trying to ruin somebody's life. So that's a really hard message to come up against as a survivor coming forward and trying to tell your story. And also, being on a college campus, the chances of you running into your abuser are pretty high. So people might not feel safe for coming forward, telling their friends, and most times that person knows their abuser, whether it's a friend, a classmate, somebody that lives in their dorm, somebody that lives in their building. But most times they're known to the victim and survivor, so it makes it harder for them to come forward and share that because they fear retaliation, they fear they won't be believed, they fear that their safety might be put at risk if they do come forward. But our culture is not very friendly to survivors of sexual assault most times. And
what are some reasons that specifically LGBTQIA individuals don't come forward with what happened to them?
A lot of it is related to the reasons that other survivors of different cultural backgrounds don't come forward, and that's not being believed. A lot of times when you are LGBTQ, people will say, oh, well, you are LGBTQ because you were assaulted. You are part of the queer community because you didn't necessarily, I'm trying to think of how to put this correctly. They'll say that that your story isn't authentic, sometimes because of your LGBTQ status, or they won't take it as seriously.
So sexual violence at its core is about power and control, and an imbalance of power and control. So it's an opportunity for someone who's causing harm to use sex as a violent weapon and take the other person's humanity away. And so there's lots tied into that about reasons that individuals then struggle to come forward or don't feel safe enough to come forward. Most of the time, the person that's caused harm is somebody that's known to the survivor. So it's a lot of the times what we were taught as kids is stranger danger. And that happens, that certainly does happen. But what we see much more frequently in this work, in this community, is that the vast majority of the time, the person that's caused harm is also known to the survivor. So then coming forward isn't just coming forward against somebody that there's a linear set of emotions and thoughts about. It's really complicated and complex. The person that's caused the trauma might also be somebody that the survivor loves and feels an affinity towards, or trusts in other capacities.
Why is it you think that law enforcement and the judicial systems, they tend to scrutinize the victim more than the perpetrator?
I think normally in a lot of these cases of sexual violence, there tends to be a lot of victim blaming that happens, and people don't, want to believe that that could happen, and so it makes it harder for them to realize that this person is, struggling to tell their story, struggling to come forward, and so they oftentimes will put the blame on them or ask them what they were doing, what they were wearing, and that makes it really hard for them to tell that story. So, we want to make sure that when somebody does disclose that to us, that we're meeting them with compassion or meeting them with belief. It's not our jobs to question them, what they were wearing, what they were doing. Our job, when somebody comes forward, is to ask, what can we do to help? How can we, get them the resources that they might need? How do we support them in that time? But we do live in a culture that places a lot of blame on the survivor when they come forward, but doesn't hold perpetrators accountable for their actions in the same way.
You see lower reporting, that's probably indicative of a system that's actively discouraging survivors from coming forward, because, like the statistics I just mentioned, those are statistics of incidents, and you want the stats of incident to match the stats of reporting, because that means that, there are places that a survivor can go to that are going to be safe and healthy.
When you say if I were to come forward, it could ruin my career. Why is it that the victim is always treated with the scrutiny and their career is always the one that's jeopardized, but not the perpetrator?
Exactly. It's a really hard question. I mean, I think when you're the victim, if you're working in a place where you're a business person, a lawyer, a doctor, if people know who you are, they're going to be less inclined to want to conduct business with you because they may think you're too emotional, or having you on their legal team or as your will cause too much drama that isn't to do with their specific issue. And that's terrible. That's not okay, because victims should not also have to be shunned for talking about what happened to them.
How has Me Too kind of changed the definition of what is sexual misconduct?
So this is actually something I really wanted to talk about, so this is good. There are plenty of videos out there where men are saying, oh, I can't compliment a woman, I can't, give her a hug, and then there are videos saying, oh, if you pat her on the butt in the workplace when you give her a hug, that's not okay. Can you say, you look nice today? Sure. But and for me, it seems like it's not changing, it's just becoming clear, because sexual misconduct has always been the same. You can't do things. But I think for men, a lot of the times, they're frustrated because they feel like they're unable to interact with women without being accused of sexual misconduct. And I understand where they might feel that, but for me it's kind of like there are very clear things that constitute that, and you should be able to not do those things.
What are some things that male students specifically can do to change the culture on college campuses?
I think what male students can do is be willing to stand up and intervene, whether they're downtown or just on campus. They see something wrong, having the courage to go up to the guy and say, "Hey, back off." You know, just being able to go up front and tell them to stop.
There's some things that college students can do to kind of change the culture, to change the conversation.
I think making it more services more accessible and more well known, and not having it be something that's shameful, and just making people feel overall more comfortable instead of ashamed.
My body!
My choice!
My body!
My choice!
Do you think it's possible to live in a world where no one has to say "me too"?
Oh, how wonderful.
So. Ideally.
Yes, in an ideal world, but I don't know, it's ingrained. I mean, I'm 74 years old, and I find all kinds of stuff as I look at myself and the culture that I was raised in, and see things that I don't like. And I think it's going to take some time.
It's not going to go away. I think that people have been silenced for way too long, and now that we have the opportunity to speak out, like, no one's ever going to be quiet about it again.
That is one of my greatest hopes, is that violence against vulnerable people, violence against women, will finally end. I don't expect it's going to happen tomorrow, but I think over the next 5 to 10 years we'll see a big difference.
No